So I was like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to achieve something to make them proud. So I work hard because I want to justify all of the sacrifices that they made for me by coming to the US.
He says, what I would tell any entrepreneur that thinks they're going to disrupt, you have to be 20 times better, at least.
Natalie, it's so gracious of you. Really an honor. Thank you so much for accepting.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so 10 a.m. your time. I'm at 1 p.m. time over here. So I wanted to know, do you drink coffee?
Well, I don't know if you can hear it right now. I'm making a second batch of coffee. Yeah, because I'm an early riser. So by 10 a.m., I'm working on my second cup.
Can I ask you what kind you drink?
You know what? There's this really good coffee producer out of San Francisco. It's called Wind and Sea by Andy's Coffee Town Roasters. So good. So that's what I'm having.
Can I ask how you drink it? Is it like an espresso type or a long format?
No, long. Yeah, it's like a regular coffee. I wish I had a cool cappuccino machine because I used to live in Italy and have like cappuccinos and espressos. But, you know, I have to say, you have to, if you're going to buy like an espresso machine, you got to go really fancy. And I haven't wanted to make that kind of commitment of dropping like, you know, $1,000 on a coffee machine when I can put it into Bitcoin. So I'm like, oh, maybe, but someday I'm going to have a cool coffee machine.
That's so funny. Well, I saw that you lived in Italy for a little while in Florence. That's first of all, that's amazing because I'm in love with it. I'm Italian descent. My parents are Italian. So for sure, I dream about Italy on the daily, especially Florence. Were you in Florence exactly? Well, that was the city you were in?
Sì, allora, yes, I lived in Florence for 2 years. And sometimes people are surprised to learn that in school, I actually double majored in journalism and Italian studies. And fun fact, I created the Italian major. Like I was the first person in my whole university to graduate with Italian studies because they offered only 3 languages, Spanish, German, and French. And I was like, why don't they have an Italian major? So I got a professor to sponsor me. We created a curriculum. I went out there. I did an internship out there. I was studying there for 4 semesters and I graduated with an Italian major. They gave me a little tassel that was the color of the Italian flag.
You still have that?
Yeah. So I think my mom has it somewhere. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's so cool. Since you mentioned that, it made me think like that go-getter attitude you have. I guess you continued that your whole life. You could attribute that to the success you're seeing now.
Yeah. I think it's just that immigrant mentality. My family immigrated from Eastern Europe and I just watched my parents work so hard. And they are such good people. Like my parents are salt of the earth, God-fearing, just all they want is to sacrifice for their children to make their lives better. And I saw that and that makes a huge impression on you, right? So I was like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to achieve something to make them proud. So I work hard because I want to justify all of the sacrifices that they made for me by coming to the US and getting a really late start. They started over in basically their early 40s. So
exactly. Yeah, I heard your story. I was listening to your interview on the What Bitcoin Did podcast. It was really, really fantastic. And Peter did a good job hosting you. He let you speak and you spoke well. Like I had like some small tears in my eyes when you were talking about the story of your parents coming here, working hard, and all that they did. So really wonderful. And I could sort of relate. My grandfather was the one who immigrated here from Sicily, and he worked until his last days. He passed away last year in December, so just a few months ago. But he really worked. He was 89 years old, and he had a store that did its 60th year anniversary, and till his late 80s, he was working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, like nonstop. So I guess we have a lot in common with that immigrant type mentality of like hustling.
Well, I send my condolences. I lost my grandma in May. It was so sad. And the same with her. She immigrated in her 60s and was working. I mean, that's the age that some people retire here. And she got a job in the US. She didn't know the language. She was working as a cook. And I admire their just sacrifice and dignity and all of it.
Exactly. That's beautiful. Did you learn how to speak Italian?
Yeah, in school. So I was out in Italy for 4 semesters and studied. I became fluent, and it's so frustrating because if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So I don't really have people to practice with. I used to read books in Italian. I used to dream. When I got to the point, I think, of fluency, I was in Italy working, and I started to dream in Italian. And I was like, whoa, I speak Italian now. But, it's so sad because now I don't get to practice, and I feel like I've lost a little bit of it, but I need to go back because I haven't been to Italy now since before the pandemic, and I used to go every single year to visit friends and go on vacation. So I am very much due for a trip.
Have you ever been back to Poland?
Yes, I have, but not for a long time. I want to go back to Poland as well. It's changed so much since my family immigrated. It's much more open now. It's much more driven actually by free markets than a lot of the other countries in the EU. People actually live a pretty good life there. So I would love to go back and visit. I know that the city, I mean, Krakow, Warsaw, all of these big cities there are so beautiful. The area along the sea is beautiful. So not only do I want to go back, but I think more people should visit, because whenever I talk to Americans, people have been to Rome or London or Paris, but most haven't been to Poland, and they don't know what Polish cuisine is. So yeah, I highly recommend people explore it some more, because it's a beautiful culture and beautiful people.
Exactly. I was a bit of a fan. I was seeing the Polish president in the news in the past couple of years, and he seemed like a potential Bitcoiner, a freedom lover.
I literally I messaged, I think, his team on Twitter just saying, could I talk to you about Bitcoin? But we'll see. I would not be surprised. I would think that just the mentality and the freedom leanings of a country that, for so long had no real identity, in the sense that it was being invaded from one side or another. It was under communism. I think that they would be for Bitcoin.
About Bitcoin, I had a couple of questions. I identify as a Bitcoiner. I love the story, but I was a little, just with the price action, and it's sad to base anything off price action, but it's like, I feel like it didn't hold up to the story that we were sold. I was sort of getting some doubts. I was saying, oh, maybe some big money came in there and sort of tainted our beautiful story, our beautiful freedom-loving story. And now the evil guys, they got back in and they corrupted our clean money again, and like, we'll never end up winning. Did you ever have these sort of thoughts, or did you ask these sort of questions?
I definitely thought that Bitcoin would go higher and then find a support level closer to, maybe the $40,000, $50,000 range. I really thought at one point, especially last year, that we were going all the way up until the six figures. But we did have some knockdowns along the way, right? I mean, China's mining ban, I think that on the bullish side, it really showed the resiliency of the Bitcoin network and how important the difficulty adjustment is, and the fact that it kept producing block after block. And, a country banning it can't kill it, can't stop it. It can only slow it down a little bit. But then, when the liquidity from the system started to drain, Bitcoin came along with it. I just thought, again, that it would happen a little later on, when Bitcoin had ascended to higher highs. Right now, we're in unprecedented times. We've never had inflation this high with this much debt. The Fed is between a rock and a hard place. I think the political narrative, they're trying to do the best that they can to try to spin it so that people think that we somehow have this great economy, when the reality is that prices are ridiculously high. Things are becoming more and more unaffordable. And we also now have, in terms of unemployment, they can maybe claim victory that, we dropped the unemployment rate, but more people are having to get part-time jobs, or having to get a second or third job. That's not a very successful economy that's producing things of value. So I think we're just in really interesting times, and Bitcoin is highly liquid. It's 24/7. People still don't understand it. People trade off the margins. There's not regulatory clarity.
Yes,
we have a lot of things running against it during tightening financial conditions and a decelerating economy. So, this is why we're at where we're at.
The story is, a lot from the Bitcoin side, is that we're saying how terrible the fiat currency is. I agree with all of it. The debt-based system, the interest rates, all the mess that the people in control are making. But then the question is, so I agree with that. I bought into that. And then I asked myself, but does Bitcoin really solve it? Because that's always our response as Bitcoiners, right? Oh, Bitcoin solves this, Bitcoin solves. So I agree 100% that the fiat system is not the best system at all. But does Bitcoin actually solve it?
I really believe that it does, because here's what I am trying to point more people to understanding, who are not even in Bitcoin, but sort of the general audience, the people that I speak to when I go on media appearances. This system is doomed to collapse, because we transitioned from an economy that was based on production and value to one that is completely based on credit. And for 40 years, we expanded credit. There was so much easy money that was created in order to prevent, the natural cycle of cleansing that would happen when the bust arrives in the business cycle. We have just pumped in so much more money. And now we are so far into debt that the only way to keep going is it's basically two scary situations. Number one, keep debasing the currency to a point of just hyperinflation, right? That in the long term, because you're basically having to print in order to service the debt, and that balloons the wealth concentration, and that has a huge impact on society because people grow more polarized, populist uprisings happen, politicians are able to fight and divide people further. Or on the other side, you have to go austerity. You have to allow a massive crash to happen because there's so much debt to wipe out. It would be 10 times worse, I think, than the 1930s depression. So what happens? Well, politicians want to get elected, so they go the printing route. So it's going to get worse in terms of the division, the wealth concentration. So the reason I think Bitcoin fixes it is literally it is the only system that exists counter to that. It's not based on credit. It's based on savings and scarcity and decentralization that we can opt into peacefully to try to rebuild and get people on this life raft. That's why we try so hard to get the adoption, because there is no other way. Like the two paths now that have diverged in the wood are both disastrous, and they're going to print. And I think they go in the direction of printing and debasement because it's easier to get elected than to say, okay, we're just going to let it all unwind and let the debt crisis, the debt spiral just ensue. They're not going to let that happen. So they're going to print again. They're going to blow up the bubble further. The S&P is going to go to 6,000, whatever. But what does that actually mean? Everything's getting more expensive, right? The people who have assets benefit. So we need Bitcoin. We need Bitcoin more than ever. Thank goodness that we have Bitcoin. And that's why I really am so passionate about getting the word out, because the system is doomed to fail.
Wow, that's a scary thought, though. When you say that, I mean, for sure, as Bitcoiners, we would rejoice in the sense that, okay, we've found this solution and we're preaching it. But if the system is doomed to collapse, that means like, oh my God, that's unfathomable consequences. Do you ever think about that? Does that worry you at all?
Well, that's why, so many of us feel like we have to get this word out and as quickly to as many people as possible, because I don't want there to be some sort of chaotic, climactic, violent, kinetic energy driven battle. If we start to get people on the Bitcoin standard, we won't need to have a massively conflict-ridden fallout. And that's what I'm trying to prevent, because again, we're either going in the direction of more civil unrest because people feel left behind and frustrated and are begging for entitlements from the government, which they can't afford because they don't have enough taxpayer base to pay for it, or we go in the direction of a crash. So we need something else. Like, that's the thing that people don't understand, is we think that we can keep the music going forever. I don't know, because of a lack of understanding of economics, because we think that America always has to be the superpower global reserve currency, even though other countries are already starting to prepare for a world when it's not. I mean, this is really our only hope and our only solution. And to be honest with you, before I learned about Bitcoin and studied it, I didn't have a very hopeful, positive outlook on what the future could be. And now I really do. Like, I feel like I'm part of a fight to fix some of these problems, and we have a technology that we can rely on, and we have to get people on the Bitcoin train.
There was one night in particular, Natalie, I remember when it was like already at 22, and it was like 2 a.m. I was watching on my phone. It was like 21K, 20K, 19K, 70, like before my eyes. I'm like, oh my gosh. I just felt like, I said, oh, did I misunderstand something? Am I confused? But I would assume then that the story is that we're just in the early innings. I guess that's the way to understand that at this point, that we're really in the early innings of something that could be revolutionary.
This is the early innings. It's highly misunderstood. We have very volatile times because of the money expansion in response to the pandemic. And also, I think that people have to remember what happened in like the dot-com bubble. A lot of money poured in, just like it did during that time. Y2K, they were scared that all the computers were going to shut down. Money came pouring in, and all of that had to drain out of the system. But along with that, we had the Amazons that went from $100 to $5, right? If you had bought Amazon at $100, you'd be a genius, right? But probably when it came down to 5, people were like, "Oh, you're crazy if you owned Amazon." So we have to think about, again, the long term. If you believe in Bitcoin, you should be dollar cost averaging. If you don't believe in Bitcoin, you haven't done enough homework, so you got to do some more homework. But no, ultimately, I think that we got to remember to zoom out. A lot of us are really impatient, and it's going to be some more pain ahead, of course, because this system is so manipulated that it's going to be more pain before we can reinitiate a climb, I think.
Exactly, because I guess it is sort of tied to, as much as we would hate to admit it, it is sort of tied to the fiat system in a sense. First of all, we need the fiat money to buy it, and and even the people, the whole, I guess, the exchanges with the debt based and the leveraging, and that didn't help. So that's what I mean. I think we're in the early innings. There's probably like a lot of clean out to do before Bitcoin could succeed if it is the champion. So let's jump into your career. First of all, you speak wonderfully. I find that sometimes when I conduct interviews, it takes me like 1 minute to get out my question, but I'm sort of trying to build it up. But you haven't prepared. Did you develop that skill in any sort of way, or did that come with time, or were you always gifted with that?
No, I truly think that everything is based on practice and repetition and studying whatever skill that you want to acquire. I was a journalist for 10 years. That's my whole career. I've always done the same thing. I've interviewed people, and then I've condensed that information in a way that I can communicate it to a very general audience. So this is what I've done day in and day out for the last 10 years. So that's one thing. And then the other is, I think that there's like a natural energy, component to it, where I was always extroverted. I was always curious, and that made things a little bit easier as well. I come from parents that were very, very encouraging and nurturing, telling me that I can really do whatever I want. So I never had a lot of fear when it came to taking chances or knocking on doors or asking people for help or asking people for an opportunity. And I think that has really helped me. And I try to encourage people, especially young people nowadays, because when I look at the generations that are growing up after me, I feel so bad that they are so entrenched in social media and this digital world that they lose some of their socializing skills, their communication skills. They're all like scared to pick up a phone or talk to someone in person. There's bullying, people are one person online and another person in real life. And I think that hurts society overall, because communication is so important. Face to face, actually getting to know someone, talking, asking questions. And I worry that we're losing a little bit of that now with the digital age. But.
Yeah. Well, that's the trick, because I'm sure a lot of good comes from this social media. It depends how you filter your information and what you're seeing. So a lot of good could come, but definitely a lot of negatives. So you've interviewed some, like, I guess, all the heavy hitters in the space. So kudos to you. Saylor, I was like, I love Michael Saylor. How was it interviewing him? How do you, or even Preston Pysh, maybe on that same level? Like he seems very smart to me. So when you interview these highly intellectual people, how do you conduct? You stay back, just ask some simple questions and let them speak?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely known for letting my interview subjects talk, even if they're going to go on tangents, because I just want to hear what the person's saying. And I love that the podcast outlet allows you to do that. It's a different format than television, where I have a very limited amount of time. But I try to do my homework, and I try to meet them where they're at. They are so much smarter than me, and I just want to learn from them. And I also just try to remember my audience. Like, I came into Bitcoin having no real financial literacy. I didn't understand economics. And my eyes were opened when I started to read the amazing books that are in the space, and learning from people on Twitter and in podcasts and YouTube videos like Saylor and Preston and Jeff Booth and all these people. And so I feel like I'm on a learning journey, and learning's fun. And when we can learn together, I think, it's a great thing. And so I just try to simplify my questions and, try to get at the heart of it, because we can go into such weeds, especially with Bitcoin or our monetary system. But at the end of the day, what is the most important? And what is the thing that most affects people who are busy and have jobs in different industries? So that's how I kind of try to approach my interviews. But I'm just so grateful that I even have the chance to talk to these people, because they are way, way above me.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, one funny part at the Bitcoin conference, I loved the segment when you were with Portnoy and Ben Askren, and then Dave Portnoy, he realized that like his coins are on the exchange. and all you guys
Oh
were sort
yeah.
of laughing at him, and he was like, wait, this is not funny. He was confused. He didn't know what was happening. He probably had like millions of dollars of Bitcoin on sitting on an exchange.
I know. It's really interesting when you get to know people and they might even have Bitcoin, but then you start to poke a little bit and you're like, oh, you don't understand all of the things that we talk about with Bitcoin. But everyone will get there. Everyone will get there for sure.
Does it ever happen when you interview someone and perhaps it's not going very well, or it's a little boring, or they're not answering the question, or they're just talking too much and rambling? Did that ever happen?
Oh, yeah. I mean, doing this for 10 years every single day, interviewing sometimes multiple people a day for sure. Some people are just not as able to formulate sentences that, hit on the theme. They're not as concise. They're maybe a little nervous. Everyone has such different personalities. The lucky thing is in the Bitcoin Twitter world, there are a lot of really great speakers. And even if they go on tangents, it's all super interesting and you want to follow along and it sparks a lot more questions. But certainly you have people that, maybe aren't comfortable being interviewed and you do your best. Simplifying things really always helps. Like I can't tell you how many times I've interviewed, actually in my career, probably scientists were the worst. If I had to break down something on a science level, I would talk to guys that are brilliant, PhDs and whatever, releasing these journal articles, but when you would talk to them, they would talk in so much jargon. And it's just a bunch of word salad that probably works in academia or when people actually understand the subject very deeply. But to an average viewer, I'm like, okay, can you break this down? How would you explain it to a 5-year-old? Even simple. I would be like, you have to like dumb them down because they're so smart. So yeah, there's a little bit of everything. You get to. That's why I wanted to work in this space because I was like, gosh, to be a journalist, you get to interview people from all walks of life. You get to learn constantly. You get to travel and just see how other people live and what they think. And I don't know. I just always thought it was an amazing career. So I'm blessed to do this.